Old Testament. Old Testament, Old Testament. What do you do with yours? You read it, Gene? Wow. You know, for the longest time, I didn't know what to do. I would read Genesis, man, that's thrilling stuff. Exodus, man, like plagues and deliverance and like plowing through Genesis and Exodus. Leviticus is cool because it's just so weird. And Numbers, you know how it is. It's just, meh. Do I really need Numbers? So I would skip Numbers to get to Deuteronomy, which is rehashing some stuff. And Joshua's cool because we got wars, and I'm a dude, and I like wars, but I got questions. Why is God slaughtering these people? Judges, things go downhill, and then my reading goes downhill, and just have a hard time, right? I mean, maybe you think your Old Testament, like I thought for a long time, right? I mean, we got some books of some historical stuff. We've got the law. We've got some man who's pretty smart, so he writes down a bunch of his wisdom. We got a guy who talks. We got a bunch of guys who talk to God in the Psalms. And we got a lot of prophets. What do you do with it? What do you do with it? We're trying to rebuild what you do with it back in here. Because I went to 7-8 years of biblical studies, schools, intensive studies. I'll be honest with you. This question was posed to professors. And their answer was, well, it was Jesus' Bible. And it's not good enough. You need the Old Testament. Listen to me. You need the Old Testament. You cannot understand Jesus if you do not have the Old Testament. There's no way, if you are introduced to Jesus and you encounter the things he says, there's no context to interpret his words without the Old Testament. You can't do it. Just can't. You need the Old Testament. But more than that, right? We've been seeing how Jesus is Yahweh, the Son of God. We're going back to the Old Testament. The Old Testament is a blueprint of the gospel. And it's almost play by play in the Exodus story. I love the song we just sang. Fear. You're no longer slaves to fear. And I think the root of all fear that's buried within you, or close to the root, close to the core, is the fear of death. The fear of death. What will happen? And you're no longer slaves to the fear of death, to the fear to death. No longer slaves to fear of death. I think exactly how those lyrics went. Jesus says specifically, you're no longer slaves to sin. I mean, that's a huge realm. What does that even mean? No longer slaves to, put it precisely, missing the mark. You're no longer slaves to sin, to the realm of sin. I mean, that's a huge truth, fact, that we can't just boil down to one nugget. We get to walk away from our sin and never return. Yes, it's so much more than that. So much more. The consequence of darkness in this world, the consequence of sin living in your flesh, and how your flesh has been crucified and buried with God's, with Jesus. You need your Old Testament. And I want to build another reason why you need your Old Testament today. But let's go, John 8. Let's start at verse 31. We're going to read 31 and 32, then go to verse 48 and read to the end of John 8. So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed in him, "If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Skip to verse 48. The Jews answered him, "Are we not right in saying that you are a Samaritan and have a demon?" Jesus answered, "I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. Yet I do not seek my own glory. There is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. Truly, truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death." The Jews said to him, "Well, now we know that you have a demon. Abraham died, as did the prophets. Yet you say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died? And the prophets died. Who do you make yourself out to be?" Jesus answered, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say, he is our God. But you have not known him. I know him. If I were to say that I do not know him, I would be a liar like you. But I do know him, and I keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad. So the Jews said to him, you are not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham? Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. So they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. Father God, I stand here and I ask you to speak your words by the power of your Spirit through me. That you illuminate the truth inside of me and inside of those listening, so that we can know that we are free. And Father, in this room this morning, well, there's some like myself who can't fully comprehend what that freedom entails. And we have walked back into the bondage of sin because of security's sake. And to be honest, God, it's hard to shake the fear of death. But you said, we will not taste it. We will not see it. We will not experience it. I want to know why I'm so afraid and we're so afraid to die. Father, have we stopped short of understanding the promise of our inheritance? Father, have I failed in realizing and grabbing hold of the truth of the glory which will be displayed inside of us? Have we not fully grasped what your Son, Jesus Christ, did when he came to this earth, being the firstborn of all creation, hung on a cross? I don't know. But we have no need to fear. And I thank you for that. And I thank you for your Son. I thank you for preserving this word to us that's found in this gospel for thousands of years. Amen. I get these emails in my inbox often of people who need prayer. And this week I got one from a Cuban pastor who knock on the door, opens the door, it's the police. Arrest him and his wife, and minutes later, his house is bulldozed over because his house was a church. And he didn't pull the proper permits. Lost everything. This is the God you worship. A world that does not understand him. And you may find yourself in a position of wandering through life, wondering if God is there. You lose it all. I know there's some who promise, maybe people who've preached, who've promised blessing upon blessing upon blessing if you know God. You tell this Cuban pastor who just lost everything. Maybe it'll be restored. Maybe it won't. There's so much more to this life than this life that we see. And I hope you get to taste this. John 8:31 and 32. So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Now, this is a very broad idea. Truth. What truth of what, Jesus? Talk to me. Truth. You'll know the truth. Come on, explain yourself. What truth? Truth of what? I mean, it's so wide open that it makes me wonder. I mean, and it actually, I want to focus in and narrow in on the topic of truth to know what the truth is all about. But the reality is, we live in a world led by the father of lies. It's a whole entire smokescreen, And Jesus says your eyes will be open to see all. You will know the truth. And it's a heart knowledge, not a cognitive, it's not a mental knowledge. Your mind may catch up to your heart, but you will experience and see truth because Jesus embodies truth. And then this topic of freedom. You'll know the truth and the truth will set you free. I mean, this has plagued me for a while. I want to know what that freedom is. Freedom from what? I want to know, why do I keep returning back to my wrongdoing if I've been set free? I want to know, why do I fear if I've been set free? Free of what, Jesus? Come on, explain yourself. Well, he does. Right? Anyone who commits a sin is a slave to sin, but this is still not specific enough for my itchy ears. But he doesn't explain himself. Because it's that broad, it's that deep, it's that wide, it's not explainable in our human terms. If you abide in my words, you will be made like you were made to be, made right. And we try to understand and wrestle these doctrines and these concepts so that we can handle them. But they're meant to handle us. They're meant to move us. I use this as a platform to move into John 8:48, because if I take a guess, some of you have fear. And maybe you don't. And I don't want to put a trigger in your mind and tempt you to be afraid, because you have nothing to be afraid of. But for those of you who are, why do you? What is the root of that fear? And I think ultimately it's the fear of this life falling apart and getting beyond your control. And ultimately, what is really behind the grave? Verse 48. Let's just walk through this. And then I want to paint a picture of the gospel as clearly as I can in the Old Testament. The Jews, now see, hold on. We're getting a picture of something going on here. Jesus is having a conversation with these individuals, and we see a picture. But if you know Jesus, you know he's God. You know he is truth. He knows, if you know John 2, that he knows what is in everyone, there's no mistakes. There's no one saying anything in this conversation that has taken Jesus off guard, right? I mean, like in our conversations, we stay on guard, or we react to what is said. We don't know necessarily what you're going to say to me, I'm going to say to you. Jesus knows. And what we get to see is not just the picture, but we get to actually see the individual pieces of the puzzle that make the picture. We get to see, and I tell you this often, Jesus using words to move this crowd to react in a certain way. We get to see the mind of Jesus and how he interacts with individuals like these Jews who don't believe him. We get to see words placed out that are not accidental, and they're moving him to his final mission, the cross. The Jews answered him, "Are we not right in saying that you are a Samaritan and have a demon?" Jesus answered, "I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me." See, okay, these Jews, this is that, it's like tit for tat, it kind of feels like, right? Jesus says, "Hey, you're of the devil," and the Jew says, "Well, you're a Samaritan, and you have a demon." It almost feels like this little bickering match. But I don't think Jesus has lost his emotional control. I think he's laying out facts, but he's beginning to build words that this crowd cannot bear to handle. And they open up. To call him a Samaritan is to say you're not of the heritage of Abraham, and therefore you don't belong to God. It's a very, very low blow. And to say you have a demon is saying you do not even have the ability to honor God, because in the Jewish mindset, if you had a demon, you're dishonoring God. And Jesus, he stands up and he says, no, I do not have a demon. I honor my Father. You dishonor me. I just want to talk to you on a personal note for a minute. These guys have hit, Jesus had laid the truth out in front of them, and it's apparent they cannot handle it. There is no room in their heart for the conviction. Their mind is wrestling with the conviction of the truth, and they don't know what to do, so they fire back. Okay? If you have people in your life that is just evident that they need to know the truth, and you have delivered it to them, and they become abusive, they become angry, they shut you out, they become violent, follow Jesus' example here. He doesn't lose his cool. He states the truth, and he continues on. What they will do, if you've experienced this, is they will try to belittle you as they did Jesus. They will take blows such as, well, and this is one I get here sometimes, people walking in off the street asking for stuff, and if I say no, well, you're not a preacher, you're not a Christian, you don't know the love of God. And they will go to the core of who you are in order to, the work of darkness, insert a lie. And if you let that lie sit in, you begin to respond back in a likewise manner. In those moments, if you have given someone the truth in love, right? Read 1 Corinthians 13, understand what it means to give the truth in love, patiently forbearing with someone. You have to remind yourself the truth. You are a child of God. This person does not define me. And like Jesus does, he says it out loud. No. No. I do not have a demon. I do not dishonor my Father. If you're that person that responds in anger, I want to ask you something. I want you to stop. If someone is talking to you and it's making sense in your mind that what they're saying is true, but the conviction cannot land in the heart. And so you respond back out of agitation, out of frustration, and you fire back. I want to encourage you to stop in that moment, right, and ask yourself, why am I responding like this? Is it because I have suppressed the power of the Spirit in me somehow, some way? Why am I responding like this? Ask that question. If you got the split moment in your mind to stop the rampage, ask yourself, why am I responding like this? If what they're saying is true and in love, why can't I bear it? That may take you a long ways in seeing the truth. My 2 cents worth. Do with it what you want. Jesus answered, I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. Yet I do not seek my own glory. There is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. Truly, truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death. Don't take away a single word there. He will never see death. What is their response? The Jews said to him, now we know you have a demon. Abraham died, the prophets, everyone dies. Jesus says you will never see death. Well, no, but we die, right? I mean, this is kind of maybe the interpretation. Well, we die, but we have life. No, you don't understand. You don't understand. It's not death. It's a passing. It's a crossing the Jordan. You will never experience not even a nanosecond away from God. The moment this flesh gives way, life continues. There is no beep, oh, we're picking up again. It's there. Life is in you. The Spirit is in you. It does not ever cease to exist, although the flesh gives way. You have life forever. We're explaining a little bit about your life today inside of Jesus and a little bit from the Old Testament. You don't see death. You don't taste death. There's no need to fear death because death does not exist. Okay, I understand. Fear the process of dying, but I bet you, I've never experienced death, but I bet you've experienced more painful things than what death will feel like to you. You don't have to fear death because you will not die. But this sounds kind of odd to say. I mean, to hear myself say, I'm like, well, come on. I mean, as Jesus saying, who knows, maybe a funeral procession just like, and he's like, well, that wasn't expected. You know, I mean, people die, right? But Jesus is very clear. As a child of God, you do not see death. All right, so what is the response, right? And you say, well, okay, see, I mean, in the Jewish terms, what did they say? Well, the Jews said to them, Now we know that you have a demon. Abraham died, as did the prophets, that you say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death. Now don't get too bent out of shape between the words see and death. It means basically the same thing, to experience death. Jesus says you will never experience death. You see, now you've got to redefine death as to something other than this body giving away. Am I good? I hear a little popping up here. If you don't hear it, I'm good. All right, okay, you seem good. A little bit. Jesus answered. Oh, hold on, back up. Are you greater than our father Abraham? I get that. I just want to sing the song. Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I cannot read Father Abraham and not like my mind just busts out in singing. Now you know every time I read Father Abraham, that's what's going on in my mind. I'm fighting it back. So, all right. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died, and the prophets died? Who do you make yourself out to be? You see, the careful crafting of Jesus' words gets them to ask the question. The question. The question you have to face this morning because you're here. Who do you make yourself out to be? Jesus answered, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. In other words, if I make you see who I am, it falls flat. He said, it's not my role, it's not my job. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say he is our God. That's what the Father does. He will teach you, if he wants to, who I am. I mean, Jesus could have busted out a pretty sweet magic trick and kind of convinced them mentally who he was. I mean, he could have turned a guy into a frog and turned another one into a prince and had him kiss. And I mean, he could have done anything he wanted, anything. He could have took a leg off one guy and put it on another guy and then switched them. I mean, he could have literally pulled out anything he wanted to prove to them who he was. And he just keeps talking. That's not my job. I find evangelism quite easy. I find evangelism quite easy. I find myself actually a lot like Peter on the rooftop, taking a nap during the day and waiting for the door to knock. And like, just waiting on God to send someone. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not against evangelism and missionaries and all that, but I've come to know something. It is the Father's role to make his Son significant in someone's heart. I cannot force that in you. I cannot. I can, as Jesus is doing, preach the truth, but I pray to the Father that he reveals to you his Son. That's not my role. And for too often, for too long, I think we have pushed people to conversions instead of just laying out the truth and praying. We've been more concerned with filling our churches than we have filling the minds of people with the knowledge of Jesus and filling God's ears with our prayers. Jesus says, this is not my role. I mean, he's the Son of God. He is the answer. He is the key. He is the life. He is the truth. And he says, no, that's up to my dad to decide in you. Which takes a pressure off of them, because if they don't get it, I guess they blame God in the end. But I bet you they get it. Right? We go back to John 24, 28. When you see the Son of Man lifted up, you will then know who I am. Just a tidbit on evangelism. And I get the response, you just don't care about evangelism. You've got a fatalistic view. Nobody will ever come to know Jesus under you. I mean, I get that somewhat often. And, well, I'm going to go take a nap, and you go hit Walmart and tell me how it works out for you. Just, if I glorify, I was actually going to go somewhere else instead of that little, and I just totally forgot where I was going. Father Abraham, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say he is our God. No. You don't. You say he's our God, but you don't get it. He's not your God. But you have not known him. I know him. If I were to say that I do not know him, if I were to agree with you, nod, okay, I get what you're saying. If I would say that, I would be a liar like you. But I do not know him, and I keep his word. Man, just tough words. Tough words. I mean, he doesn't pull on, he just lets it land. What, man? Let people feel conviction around you. Something that I personally, not the best at. Because if I tell someone the truth, I'm like, well, let me explain myself. Hold on, no, hold on. I don't want you to wrestle with it. And I ice it over. Let conviction land and let people be responsible for their reaction to it. You're not. You're responsible for delivering it in love. You're not responsible for the reaction and the attitude of those receiving it. He just straight up tells them, you're a liar. And it's just not belittling. He's laying out the truth because they belong to the father of lies. That is the character in which they belong to. That is the character in which they have. That's hard to hear. Let's just be honest. If anyone called me a liar, I probably would not want to speak to them again. And I might unfriend them from Facebook. So the Jews said, verse 56, your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad. Every word matters here. Your father Abraham rejoiced, past tense, that he would, future tense, see my day. He saw it and was glad. So, what Jesus is saying, if I'm reading this right, and I'll leave it open for you to be the judge if I am or not, Abraham, knew he would see Jesus face to face. He would see the day of Jesus come in humanity. Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would. His rejoicing came before Jesus came. Talk about faith. Abraham is alive 2,000 years, give or take, before Jesus comes into the scene as a human. And he rejoiced that he was coming to the scene as a human. He saw it and was glad. So Abraham saw Jesus in a manger. Abraham saw Jesus walking on this earth. Hebrews 11:13. Now, this is the chapter of faith. We get talking about Abraham. He says, verse 13, the author says, these all died in faith. They died in faith. Their last breath was a breath of, I'm coming home. God, here I am. Their last breath was a breath of trust. They died in faith, not having received the things promised. Now, that could be, we're talking about Abraham, the promised land. That could be the coming of the Son and the blessing of being set free because of his death and resurrection. But not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. Now see, this gives me more understanding in how life works inside of God. Abraham saw from heaven things that played out here on earth. His life is still in existence today. It never stopped. It never stopped. For people who speak thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. I actually just read 14, 15, 16 this morning, so I haven't really fully processed it, but I think this is so encouraging. For people who speak thus, let me back up and read this again. These all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and have acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For people who speak thus like what? Like you're strangers and exiles. Like you don't belong here. Like something's just not right. Like you're waiting to go home. Like this world is not your home. If people who speak thus, in other words, Abraham at the time, make it clear that they are seeking. Their eyes are set on a homeland. If they had been thinking of that land from which they had gone out, they would have had the opportunity to return, right? If Abraham thought about the place where he used to call home, and he left, and he thought about the place where he used to call home, he may have tempted himself to return. But his gaze never left the promise of the homeland. And the author of Hebrews is kind of mingling this in with you as strangers in a world. Your sight is a promised land. It's heaven. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God. He's not ashamed to be called your God. He's not ashamed of you. He's not ashamed of you. There's nothing you have done to cause him to be ashamed. Nothing you will do. He's your papa. He's your daddy. He's your father. And he's your God. And he's prepared a city. He's prepared a city for Abraham, and a city awaits for you. A new homeland. Go back to John 8. Jesus said to them, they say, you're not 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham? They're picking up what Jesus is putting down. He said, I have talked to Abraham. I have seen Abraham. And they say, well, you're not 50 years old. You have not reached the mature manhood age. That was the age of mature manhood in Jewish culture. You're claiming that you've seen Abraham. You haven't seen Abraham. Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. So they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. There is no clearer proclamation that I can find in all of Scripture where Jesus claims to be the God of the Old Testament. That is it. He is claiming to be Yahweh. And they knew it because you could tell by their reaction, we've got to kill him. Because the punishment of blasphemy was death. But they were a violent mob, angry, and they were bypassing the judicial system because they knew exactly who he claimed to be. But maybe it doesn't resonate with you like it does with them. But I guarantee you, if you sat there, you heard his words, you would have looked at a stone and had to contemplate, do I throw one or not? He was so clear to them. He answered their question, who do you make yourself out to be? And he says, I am. Before Abraham was, I am. It's not bad grammar. He's saying I transcend time. He's saying time does not constrain me. I constrain time. He's saying I am God before Abraham. He's saying I am before the foundation of the world. He's saying I am the one who called light into darkness. I am the one who hung the sun and the moon and the skies. I am the one who created Adam from the dust of the earth. And I am the one who saw he was lonely and created Eve from his rib. I am the one who walked in the garden with him in the cool of the day. I am the one who cursed the serpent because he deceived my image bearers. I am the one who told them you've got to leave the garden and go work the ground because you transgressed my law. I am the one who told Noah, man, I regret making mankind. We're going to wipe them out. But you, Noah, are righteous. I know you. I'm the one who saved Noah. And I'm the one who saved all mankind when I wiped out all mankind except Noah and every other living thing on the face of the earth. I am the one who placed Noah on the top of the mountain, pulled him out of the ark, and made a covenant to him that I would never destroy the earth again by a flood. That is who I am. I am the one who met Abraham and told him, leave your home, go to a place that I will promise you. I am the one who met him under an oak tree with two other guys and said, hey, can you count the stars? You won't be able to count your descendants. I'm the one who told him, Sodom and Gomorrah, I'm going to destroy it. And we had a little bickering match between how many righteous there. Can you destroy it if there's righteous people? Well, I destroyed it. I am the one who talked to Moses out of a burning bush. I am the one who said, I will deliver Israel by the hand of plagues. I am the one who called the water into blood, the frogs out of the Nile, the gnats out of the sky. I summoned all the flies to annoy the heck out of the Egyptians. I am the one who killed livestock. I am the one who caused boils to break out. I am the one who called hailstones to come out, destroy any other living thing. Oh, and by the way, if anything else popped out of the ground, I called the locusts. That was me. I called the sun to be darkened, and I called for the Passover meal to be instituted, and I called for the death of the firstborn in all of Egypt, so that there was not a house without someone dead, in order to free my children. I am the one who led them out. And by the way, when their enemies tried to pursue them, I destroyed them by calling the Red Sea on top of them. I'm the one who led them through the wilderness wanderings by a light and by a cloud. I never left their side, even though they complained all the time. I'm the one who told Moses, split open a rock. Yeah, you've never seen that before, and let water gush out of it. Go try to match that. I am God. That is who Jesus says he is. And I am the one who led them across the Jordan back into the promised land. Let me paint this in another way. You cannot discredit the Old Testament. It is the gospel. Every play from Genesis and Exodus in the story of the deliverance of the Israelites is your story, painted 2,000 years before Jesus ever came here. Abe's sitting in his home one day. I'll call him Abraham, you know what I mean? And God says, you got to leave. You got to leave. And he believed. God says, I'm taking to a promised land. And Abraham, he believed, and it was counted to him as righteousness. He gets up, he leaves, he doesn't turn back. He lands in a land that would be his descendants' promised land. Well, a famine came, and he trusted in God, and they stayed, never went back. Isaac was born. He stayed in the promised land. A famine came. He trusted and never went back. Jacob had 12 boys. One of them, by the hand of God, was moved to Egypt to protect God's chosen nation, because another famine was going to come. And Jacob, he contemplated in his heart, do I go to Egypt? I now know my son's alive. They have food. And God says to him, do not be afraid. Go to Egypt. I will take care of you. He gets up out of the promised land, and he walks his family into a land of slavery. Because there was security there. Now I understand God said, it's okay, go, this is of me. Well, give it a couple generations, and what do we see? The children of God, the chosen nation, sweating, working hard, because they have been enslaved to another master. Moses is walking one day, and a bush calls out to him, a bush that is on fire. And God says, I will deliver my people from the hands of their masters. And you're going to do this. And I'm going to send Aaron to speak on your behalf. And so Moses goes. And we have the plagues. And Egypt is afflicted because they have enslaved God's chosen people. The 9th plague rolls around, and the earth is covered with darkness 3 days. Between the 9th and 10th plague, a Passover meal is instituted. Eat the lamb, slap the blood on the doorpost, and when I come, send my angel to kill the firstborn, I will pass over you. And be ready to run. Be ready to run, because you will be set free. And he did exactly what he said he was going to do. The firstborn in Egypt were slaughtered. And the land cried out. There was not a house that wasn't in mourning that night. And the land literally spit them out. Get out! Get out! But the way darkness works, they realized their mistake, and they pursued. And God crushed the head of the enemy, destroyed them, You would never go back, Israel, to slaves in Egypt again. But they entered a period of wandering, 40 years of wandering in a wilderness. God provided water, living water, through a rock. He provided guidance through a light. Pillar of light for 40 years. They had a homeland in focus. They just had to get through a Jordan River. But everybody in that generation had to die. And a new generation, except two, would come to life. But you had to get across the Jordan. The new generation did not cross the Red Sea. So crossing a Jordan River where the waters part ways is a scary thing to this generation. They have not seen the hand of God. They were scared. And yet, on the other side was a promised land, and yet, yes, they had to fight for it. They had to trust God all the way. And God brought them back to where they started, the promised land. Even Adam is in a garden. You can't call it the promised land because it wasn't promised. It was given to them, but yet like the promised land. It was a place where they knew God. God knew them. God walked with them. And God said, just don't eat of that tree. But yet Eve one day found herself awfully close to the tree, and someone called out, security. Food is good to eat. Eat it. Eat it. And, it is good to eat. She ate it. She gave it to Adam, and Adam ate it. And in that moment, they were cast into a land of slavery. God literally says, you will now sweat to work the ground. You will fight the thorns. And on top of that, you have to leave the promised land. You need to leave. And he did that to give them hope. Years and years and years and years and generations passed. And we have a guy named John the Baptist who comes on the scene who says, prepare the way for the Messiah, for the Lord. He is coming to deliver the world of his sins. And Jesus shows up, and his ministry begins in a wilderness for 40 days. He is afflicted by Satan. Afflicted. Judgment begins to be carried on his shoulders. And for 3 years he walks and he encounters people who want to kill him as he delivers the truth. And we find himself one night in agony as he has one last meal with his disciples before he fulfills his mission, the Passover meal. As he looks at it and he says to his disciples, every time you eat this bread, you better remember me. Remember I set you free. Every time you drink this cup, remember that I delivered you from your sins. And just a mere few hours later, he's hanging on the cross. And once again, the sun's light fails. 3 hours. At which the firstborn of all creation is killed. In that instant, the earth cried out as the rocks shake, the tombs spit out their graves, the temple veil is torn, and we were free in that moment to walk and talk to God, to embrace God, to have peace with God like no other time before. You were set free. And you find yourself in the stage of wilderness wandering. This is where we are today. And God, in John, up to this point, Jesus made a declaration. You come to me, your heart, which were hearts of stone, will flow with living water. Try that on. And I will be your light. I will guide you through the wilderness of your life, and I will never leave your side. Never. There's no one who can tell you you have a demon. There's no one who can belittle you so small to make it a reality. I am here, and I will stick with you regardless of your response to me if my God reveals himself. You just need to get across the Jordan. You've got to get across the Jordan. Maybe that's how you talk about death. I've got to cross the Jordan. It's a little scary. Not quite sure if the water's going to collapse on me or not. But I will never take my eyes off the homeland. And while I'm here, I will live and I will love like Jesus. And I will learn to love Jesus. I will learn to follow and I will learn him and I will take him in. Because he is my life. He is my fortress. He is my shelter. In this dark world where I am a stranger and an exile, no longer a slave. And guess what? If you're not a slave to fear, nothing stops you. You will wander in a wilderness until the day you cross the Jordan and never encounter something that will slow you down. Jesus is God. And the gospel was portrayed very clearly in the Old Testament. It was a blueprint to what Jesus would come and do, God with us. And he came to set you free. And that is what I pray for you daily about. That you know Jesus, the Son of God. God. And I exhort you, pick up your Old Testament and don't be afraid of it. I encourage you, look death in the eyes and say, you know, I'm ready to cross you whenever God calls me home, because on the other side is my homeland. And speak boldly about Jesus. Tell people the truth in love. Don't fear their reaction. It simply reveals the state of where they're at. You are a child of God.